437 motorcycles, engines roaring, chrome gleaming in the morning sun. They surround a children's hospital, revving their engines so loud the windows shake. Doctors freeze, nurses stare, parents hold their breath. The riders, covered in tattoos, leather vests with skull patches, Hell's Angels, the most feared motorcycle club in America. And they're all here for one little girl, 8-year-old Zara Williams, 4th floor, room 412, bald head, portacath in her chest, terminal leukemia. This wasn't supposed to happen. None of it was. Not the cancer eating away at her tiny body. Not the army of bikers blocking every entrance to the hospital, and definitely not the tears streaming down the face of Marcus "Tank" Rodriguez, a 300-pound construction worker who hadn't cried since he was 12 years old. Have you ever seen someone and immediately thought you knew who they were? The dangerous-looking man you avoided on the street? The rough-looking woman you locked your car doors for? What if everything you thought you knew about people was completely wrong? In October 2005, two broken souls crossed paths by pure chance. A lonely biker with a heart shattered by abandonment. A sick little girl trapped in a hospital room, fighting for her life. Two people, completely different worlds. One simple act of kindness was about to change hundreds of lives forever. This isn't just another feel-good story. This is about how heroes emerge from the most unexpected places, how salvation sometimes wears leather instead of wings, how one small moment can create a chain reaction of compassion that nobody sees coming. By the time I finish telling you what really happened that day, you'll never look at a group of bikers the same way again. You'll question every judgment you've ever made based on appearances. And you'll understand why that photo of a small black girl in a leather vest, surrounded by Hell's Angels, still hangs in the lobby of St. Mary's Children's Hospital nearly 20 years later. This is the true story of how a paper airplane note and a broken-down Harley created a miracle that nobody saw coming. The morning sun creeps through the blinds of room 412 at St. Mary's Children's Hospital. 8-year-old Zara Williams is already awake. She's been up since 5:30 a.m. when the night nurse came to check her temperature and give her medicine. Zara knows the hospital routine better than she knows her old school schedule. She's been here for 6 months now, almost a quarter of her young life. The doctors say she has acute lymphoblastic leukemia. Zara just calls it the sickness that stole my hair. Every morning starts the same way. Temperature check, blood pressure, questions about pain. Then the doctors come with their clipboards and serious faces, talking about white blood cell counts and platelets. Words that used to sound like science fiction, but now are just part of Zara's everyday life. On a scale of 1 to 10, how's your pain today, Zara? Dr. Chen asks, her kind eyes crinkling above her mask. Maybe a 3, Zara answers honestly. She learned early on that lying about pain only makes things worse later. Zara's mom, Denise, sleeps on the pull-out chair beside her bed. She's been here every night for 6 months, only going home to shower and get clean clothes. Sometimes Zara pretends to be asleep just so her mom can rest a little longer. She knows adults need sleep too. The hardest part isn't the needles or the medicine that makes her throw up. It's not even losing her hair, though that made her cry for 3 straight days when it started falling out in clumps on her pillow. No, the hardest part is watching other kids come and go while she stays. Some kids get better fast, Nurse Jackie explained once. Your type of sickness needs more medicine for a longer time. But Zara isn't the type to feel sorry for herself. Not for long, anyway. Her hospital room doesn't look like a sick place. The walls are covered with colorful drawings and cards from her 2nd grade class. Pictures of her cat Whiskers are taped above her bed, and on every available surface, the windowsill, the rolling tray table, the small shelf by the TV, sits Zara's prize collection, miniature motorcycles of every color and style, 43 toy motorcycles to be exact. She counts them every morning and lines them up just right. "Which one's your favorite today?" Nurse Jackie asks as she hangs a new bag of fluids. Zara carefully picks up a black and chrome Harley-Davidson model. "This one. It looks like Uncle Ray's bike." She runs her small finger along the tiny handlebars. "He promised when I get better, he'll take me for a ride around the block." What the nurses and doctors love most about Zara isn't her politeness or her bravery during procedures, though she has plenty of both. It's her imagination, how she creates stories for each motorcycle and the imaginary riders who drive them. How she makes engine noises during painful treatments to distract herself. How she watches from her window for hours, making up lives for the people in the parking lot below. The child life specialist says Zara has exceptional coping mechanisms. Her mother says she has an old soul. Dr. Chen says she has remarkable resilience. Zara just thinks she's good at pretending. And sometimes, pretending you're okay is almost like really being okay. Today is chemo day, the worst day. The medicine that fights the cancer also makes her sick to her stomach. Her body feels like it's burning from the inside. But Zara has her system. She names the medicine Monster Juice and imagines it's hunting down the bad cells like tiny warriors. "You look ready for battle," Dr. Chen says as the nurses prepare the IV. Zara nods, clutching her favorite motorcycle toy. "My riders are ready too. They're going to chase away the bad guys." As the medicine begins to flow, Zara turns to the window. 4 floors below, the hospital parking lot fills with morning visitors. Cars pulling in and out. Ambulances occasionally rushing past with flashing lights. And sometimes, if she's lucky, a motorcycle. That's what she listens for most. The special rumble that sounds different from cars or trucks. The sound that reminds her of Uncle Ray and his promises of future rides. The sound of freedom. If you know someone fighting a tough battle like Zara, someone who finds strength in the hardest times, let us know in the comments below. Every fighter deserves to be recognized. Marcus Rodriguez never meant to be called Tank. The nickname found him 20 years ago on his first construction job when he lifted a fallen beam that pinned his foreman. 2 men couldn't budge it, but Marcus, just 19 then, hoisted it up like it was nothing. "Built like a tank," the foreman had said, and the name stuck. At 45, Tank still lives up to the nickname. 6'3", hands like baseball mitts, shoulders stretching his work shirts to their limit. His beard is thick and dark with streaks of gray. His arms are canvases of tattoos. His daughter's name, Maria, written in flowing script on his right forearm. The date of his wedding on his left. Dates that now just remind him of what he's lost. 3 months ago, after 15 years of marriage, Sandra left. Packed up their 10-year-old daughter and moved to her mother's place in California. The divorce papers came 2 weeks later. "You're never really here, Marcus," she'd said the night she left. "Even when you're sitting right in front of me, you're 1,000 miles away." She wasn't wrong. Tank had always struggled with words, with showing how he felt. Construction made sense. Motorcycles made sense. Feelings? Those were complicated. Now his 3-bedroom house sits empty in a way that has nothing to do with furniture. He still sleeps on his side of the bed, leaving Sandra's side untouched. Maria's room remains exactly as she left it. Unicorn bedspread, soccer trophies. the galaxy lights he installed on her ceiling last Christmas. Tank gets up every morning at 5 a.m., makes coffee, and stares at his phone. No messages, no calls, just the lock screen photo of Maria sitting on his Harley, grinning with missing front teeth. His co-workers have stopped asking if he's okay. They see the dark circles under his eyes, how he works through lunch breaks, how he's always the first to arrive and last to leave the construction site. Work is just distraction, a way to exhaust his body enough that his mind might rest. But it never really does. The only peace Tank finds anymore is on his 1998 Electra Glide. The moment he straddles that seat and fires up the engine, something inside him settles. The vibration beneath him, the roar drowning out his thoughts, the wind hitting his face as he accelerates. On his Harley, Tank isn't a failed husband. He isn't a long-distance father reduced to Sunday phone calls that get shorter each week. He's just a man and a machine moving through the world together. His riding buddies from the local Hells Angels chapter have tried to pull him back in. "Come to the meeting, Tank," they say. "We miss your ugly face." But he's been turning them down for weeks. Their sympathy feels like sandpaper on his skin. Even among men who pride themselves on toughness, Tank's silence worries them. Bobby Preacher. Martinez, the chapter president, stopped by last weekend with beer and pizza, trying to get Tank to talk. He left most of it uneaten in Tank's fridge. What his friends don't understand is that Tank doesn't want to feel better yet. His pain is the only thing that feels real these days. Wednesday morning starts like any other. Tank wakes from another restless night, makes coffee he barely tastes, and heads out before the sun rises. But instead of driving straight to the construction site, he takes the long way, his Harley eating up empty pre-dawn streets. Without planning it, he finds himself near St. Mary's Children's Hospital. He's worked on the new wing 2 years back, a good job with decent pay. The hospital grounds have a back road that cuts through to Madison Avenue, saving him 10 minutes of morning traffic. As he rumbles past the children's wing, the bike stutters beneath him. Then again. The engine coughs, sputters, and dies completely. "Not now," Tank mutters, coasting to a stop near a large oak tree. He climbs off, kicks down the stand, and looks up at the building beside him. 4th floor. Children's Oncology. He remembers pouring the concrete for the foundation reinforcements. Tank wipes sweat from his forehead and curses under his breath. He's got tools at home, but that's 5 miles away. His phone shows 6:42 a.m. Work starts at 7:30. As he bends to examine the spark plugs, Tank doesn't notice the small face watching from a 4th floor window. Doesn't see the tiny hand pressed against the glass. Doesn't know that his broken down Harley has just put him exactly where he needs to be. Zara Williams always woke up early. Not because she wanted to, but because hospitals never really sleep. Even at 6:30 in the morning, nurses were checking vitals, machines were beeping, and somewhere down the hall, a baby was crying. Her mom was still asleep on the fold-out chair, snoring softly. Good. Mom needed rest more than anyone. Zara turned to her favorite morning activity, watching the world wake up through her window. 4 floors below, the hospital parking lot was mostly empty. A few doctors' cars, some early shift nurses, the same ambulance that had been parked there since yesterday. Boring stuff, really. But then something different caught her eye. A motorcycle. A big black one with shiny chrome parts that sparkled in the morning sun. And a man, huge, with a beard and a leather vest, pushing it toward the shade of the oak tree. Zara pressed her nose against the cool glass. Her Uncle Ray rode motorcycles. He'd promised to take her for a ride when she got better. When, not if, he always said. Motorcycles meant freedom. They meant wind in your face and leaving problems behind. This motorcycle wasn't moving, though. The big man kept checking parts and wiping his forehead. He looked mad. No, not mad exactly. Sad. The way Dad looked when he thought no one was watching. The way Mom sometimes looked at Zara's medical charts. Zara recognized that look. She saw it in the mirror sometimes too. Without really thinking about what she was doing, Zara grabbed the notepad her child life specialist had given her for writing down questions for doctors. She pulled a crayon from the bedside drawer. Blue, her favorite color. "What should I say?" she whispered to herself, tapping the crayon against her chin. Finally, she began writing in her careful second-grade handwriting. "Hi, I saw your bike break. I hope it gets better soon. My name is Zara, and I'm 8. What's your name? P.S. I like your motorcycle. It looks fast." Zara read the note twice to check for spelling mistakes. Mom said, "First impressions matter." But now came the hard part, how to get the note down 4 floors. Her eyes landed on her collection of toy motorcycles. The little black Harley, the one that looked most like the real motorcycle outside. Perfect. She'd learned a trick from other kids on the cancer floor. If you threw light things from the small balcony outside the rooms, the hospital walls created a kind of wind tunnel. If you aimed right, stuff would land near the big tree instead of scattering across the parking lot. Zara carefully folded her note around the toy motorcycle and secured it with a rubber band from the craft table. She glanced at her mom, still sleeping, and quietly slid open the balcony door just enough to squeeze through. The morning air felt fresh on her face. Holding her breath, Zara took careful aim and tossed her message to the stranger below. Down in the parking lot, Tank Rodriguez was losing his patience. Spark plugs looked fine. Battery connections too. He'd be late for work, and after missing days last month during the worst of the divorce, he couldn't afford any more problems with his foreman. Something small landed with a quiet tap near his boot. Tank looked down, confused. A toy motorcycle with paper wrapped around it? He glanced up at the children's hospital towering above him. On a small balcony on the 4th floor stood a tiny figure, a child in pajamas, bald head catching the morning light. A small hand waved at him. Tank picked up the toy and carefully unwrapped the note. As he read the childish handwriting, something shifted inside his chest, a feeling he couldn't name right away. It had been months since anyone had shown him simple kindness. Months since anyone had cared if he was okay. And here was this kid, this sick kid in a hospital, worried about his motorcycle. Before he realized what he was doing, Tank found himself waving back. He walked closer to the building and called up, trying to keep his voice gentle despite its natural rumble. "Hey there, Zara. I'm Tank. Thank you for the note and the cool motorcycle." The small figure bounced with excitement. Tank couldn't see the child's face clearly from this distance, but he could feel the happiness radiating down. "Is your bike very broken?" The voice that floated down was high and clear. "Just needs some love," Tank called back. "It happens sometimes. My cat Whiskers got sick too, but he got better." Tank found himself smiling for the first time in weeks. "That's good to know." Zara disappeared briefly, then returned with another note tied to a different toy motorcycle. She tossed it down with surprising accuracy. Tank caught it this time. "Do you have to go to work? My mom says everyone has jobs except kids and cats." Tank checked his watch. Yes, he had to go to work. He had bills and responsibilities. But suddenly, being on time didn't seem as important as this conversation. He found a scrap of paper in his wallet and wrote back, "My job can wait a little while. What's it like on the 4th floor?" For the next hour, as the sun rose fully and the parking lot began to fill, Tank and Zara traded notes attached to the growing collection of toy motorcycles. She told him about her leukemia without using the big word, just the sickness that made my hair fall out. He told her about building houses and riding through the mountains on his days off. He didn't mention Sandra or Maria or how empty his house felt, but somehow talking to this kid made those things hurt just a tiny bit less. Tank was showing Zara how to rev a motorcycle engine using hand signals when a woman appeared on the balcony beside her. Even from the ground, Tank could see her surprise and concern. "Who are you talking to, baby?" he heard her ask. "That's Tank, Mama." Zara pointed down excitedly. "His motorcycle is sick like me, but he's going to fix it." Tank took off his bandana, suddenly aware of how he must look to a mother, a massive, tattooed stranger talking to her sick child. "Ma'am," he called up, "I hope this is okay. Your little girl, she brightened my whole morning." Denise Williams had only stepped away for 15 minutes. 15 minutes to grab coffee from the Ronald McDonald House kitchen down the hall. 15 minutes to splash cold water on her face and call her boss about extending her family medical leave. 15 minutes to pretend she wasn't watching her baby girl fight for her life. 6 months in this hospital had taught Denise to treasure small breaks, to breathe when she could, to find tiny moments of normal in days filled with blood counts and chemotherapy. But walking back into room 412, coffee clutched in her hand, Denise froze in the doorway. Zara wasn't in her bed. The balcony door stood open, and her 8-year-old daughter was leaning over the railing, talking animatedly to someone below. "Zara Williams, get back from there right now." The coffee sloshed over her hand as she rushed forward. Denise pulled her daughter gently but firmly away from the edge. Heart pounding, she looked down to see who had captured Zara's attention. A massive man in a leather vest stood in the parking lot, a handful of Zara's toy motorcycles in his enormous hands. Every protective instinct flared at once. Denise had grown up in inner-city Detroit, where she'd learned early to avoid certain types of men. Men in motorcycle gear, men with tattoos covering their arms, men who looked like they solved problems with their fists. "Who is that?" she demanded, trying to keep her voice calm. "That's Tank." "Mama!" Zara's face lit up in a way Denise hadn't seen in months. "His motorcycle broke down and I wrote him notes and he wrote back. He builds houses and rides mountains and has a dog named Boss." Denise looked back down at the man. He had removed what looked like a bandana, revealing a completely bald head, much like her daughter's. He was standing respectfully distant from the building, his body language non-threatening despite his intimidating size. "Ma'am," he called up, his deep voice carrying clearly, "I hope this is okay. Your little girl, she brightened my whole morning." Something in his voice, a gentleness that contradicted his appearance, made Denise pause. She studied him more carefully. Behind the beard and the leather was a face etched with something she recognized immediately. Sadness. The same heavy sadness she saw in the mirror every day. "Mama, can I keep talking to him? Please?" Zara tugged at her sleeve. "He's teaching me motorcycle hand signals. Look." Zara made a twisting motion with her small hand. The man below, Tank, smiled and nodded, giving her a thumbs up. In the 6 months since Zara's diagnosis, Denise had watched her daughter's world shrink to this hospital room. Friends stopped visiting. Classmates sent cards that became less frequent with each passing month. Even family called less often, uncomfortable with illness, with not knowing what to say. But now, Zara was laughing. Really laughing. Her eyes sparkled with something that had been missing for so long that Denise had almost forgotten what her daughter looked like when she was truly happy. "What's his real name?" Denise asked, still cautious. "Marcus. But everyone calls him Tank because he's super strong." Denise took a deep breath and made a decision that went against every warning she'd ever heard about strangers, especially ones who looked like trouble. "Would you like to invite your new friend up to meet you properly?" The joy on Zara's face was worth any risk. Denise watched as her daughter nearly bounced with excitement, waving down to the man. "Tank, my mom says you can come up. Room 412. 20 minutes later, Denise Williams found herself watching a 300-pound tattooed construction worker sitting cross-legged on the hospital floor with her daughter, arranging toy motorcycles in a perfect line while explaining the difference between Harleys and Kawasaki's. She had judged him instantly, automatically, and she had been completely wrong. Has someone ever surprised you by being completely different than you expected? Someone who broke all your assumptions and showed you that appearances don't tell the whole story? Share your experience in the comments below. Tank left St. Mary's Children's Hospital that evening with something he hadn't felt in months, a reason to smile. The tiny toy motorcycle Zara had given him sat on his dashboard as he drove home, a reminder of the unexpected connection he'd made. He'd spent 2 hours in room 412, showing Zara pictures of motorcycles on his phone while Denise watched carefully from the corner. At first, she'd been tense, ready to step in if needed. But as she saw how gentle Tank was with her daughter, how his massive hands carefully handled the toy bikes, how he lowered his voice to not scare her, Denise had slowly relaxed. "You've got a special little girl," Tank had told her as he prepared to leave. "Toughest kid I've ever met." That night, Tank sat alone in his kitchen, staring at the toy motorcycle. For months, he'd ignored calls from his writing brothers, turned down invitations, shut himself away with his pain. But now, for the first time since Sandra left, he felt the need to reach out. He picked up his phone and called the one person he knew would answer, no matter what. "Well, I'll be damned," came the gravelly voice of Bobby Preacher Martinez. "The dead has risen." "Hey, Preach," Tank said quietly. "Got a minute?" For the next hour, Tank told Preacher everything about his broken-down bike, about the note that had fluttered down from above, about the little girl fighting cancer who'd shown more courage than he'd seen in grown men. "Listen," Tank said finally. "I met this kid today, 8 years old, got cancer, and she's something special. Made me remember what it feels like to give a damn about something again." Preacher was silent for a moment. "Sounds like this little girl might have saved you as much as you helped her," he observed. "What do you need from us?" "I don't know yet," Tank admitted. "But I got a feeling this is bigger than just me." The next morning, Tank's Harley started on the first try. A loose connection in the ignition, nothing major. But as he pulled into the hospital parking lot, he wasn't alone. Behind him rode 12 other Harleys, their engines creating a rolling thunder that echoed off the hospital walls. Heads turned. Security guards stepped forward nervously. A group of nurses gathered at the entrance, unsure what was happening. From her window, Zara gasped, "Mama! Look! There's so many motorcycles!" Word spread quickly through the pediatric ward. Children from other rooms pressed against windows. Parents stepped onto balconies. Even some doctors paused their rounds to see the unusual sight below. Tank and his brothers parked their bikes in a perfect formation, chrome gleaming in the morning sun. 13 men in leather vests with the distinctive Hells Angels patches climbed off their motorcycles and stood at attention, looking up at the children's windows. Dr. Patricia Chen, Zara's oncologist, approached Tank with concern etched on her face. "Excuse me, sir. Is there something I can help you with?" "Yes, ma'am," Tank said respectfully, removing his bandana. "We're here to see Zara Williams, room 412. Her mother is expecting us." Dr. Chen's eyebrows rose. "All of you?" "If that's okay," Tank said. "We brought some gifts." Upstairs, Denise was helping Zara brush her teeth when a nurse knocked frantically on the door. "Mrs. Williams," she said, eyes wide. "There are 13 Hell's Angels asking to see Zara." Denise might have been alarmed if Tank hadn't called her last night to explain. Instead, she smiled at the nurse's shocked expression. "Yes, they're expected. Please send them up, though maybe not all at once." 10 minutes later, Tank entered Zara's room with 3 of his brothers. Preacher Martinez, a soft-spoken man who worked as an electrician when he wasn't riding, knelt down to Zara's eye level and presented her with a custom leather vest, child-sized, with patches that read, "Honorary Angel" and Zara's crew. "We heard you like motorcycles," Preacher said gently. "We thought you might want to be part of our family." Zara's eyes grew round as dinner plates as she held the tiny vest. Wheels. Thompson, a graying mechanic with arms covered in motorcycle tattoos, had brought Zara a small toolbox filled with toy wrenches and a pink bandana. "Every rider needs tools," he explained, showing her how each one worked. Cookie. Williams, no relation to Zara's family, a baker who moonlighted as the chapter's treasurer, carried a box of homemade cookies shaped like motorcycles. But the real surprise came when Doc Patterson, a retired Army medic who served as the chapter's road captain, announced their plan. "Zara," he explained to the wide-eyed little girl, "we'd like to organize a ride for you, a poker run to raise money for your family and other kids like you here at the hospital. Would that be okay?" Zara looked at her mother, who was struggling to process the surreal scene of leather-clad bikers sitting in her daughter's hospital room, speaking in gentle voices about organizing charity events. "What's a poker run?" Zara asked. Tank explained how riders would travel to different checkpoints, draw playing cards at each stop, and compete for the best poker hand while raising money for charity. "We'll start right here at the hospital," he said, "and every rider will get to wave at you and all your friends up in the windows." Over the next 3 hours, the Hell's Angels transformed Zara's room into an informal planning center. The remaining bikers came up in small groups, each bringing something special. Motorcycle magazines, a helmet painted pink with Zara's name, a map of the best riding routes in the state, for when you're better. Cookie took over the small table, drafting flyers for the event. Wheels sat with other children who had wandered in, curious about the commotion, showing them pictures of famous motorcycles. Doc consulted with Dr. Chen about what supplies the pediatric ward needed most. Preacher spoke with hospital administration, his quiet, respectful manner winning them over, despite initial hesitation about hosting a biker event. "These kids need something to look forward to," he explained to the hospital director. "Something besides tests and treatments. We want to give them a day they'll remember, a day when being sick isn't the only thing that defines them." By lunchtime, what had started as a simple visit had evolved into a full-scale operation. 3 nurses had volunteered to help coordinate. 2 local businesses had already agreed to serve as checkpoints after Preacher made some calls. And at the center of it all sat Zara, wearing her new leather vest over her Mickey Mouse pajamas, her face glowing with excitement as she helped design the official event poster. Denise, watching from beside the window, caught Tank's eye. "I don't understand," she said quietly. Why would you all do this for someone you just met? Tank looked at Zara, then back at Denise. Because when one of our own tells us there's someone special who needs help, we show up. It's that simple. For the first time in months, Denise felt the weight on her shoulders lighten just a little bit. These rough-looking men with their tattoos and leather had brought something back to room 412 that had been missing for too long. Hope. The ride for Zara and friends took place 3 weeks later, on a crisp November morning. What started as Tank's simple idea had grown beyond anything anyone imagined. By 8 a.m., motorcycles began arriving at St. Mary's Children's Hospital. First came the Hells Angels, Tank and his 12 brothers, their bikes freshly polished and rumbling in perfect harmony. Then came other riding clubs, the Road Warriors, the Iron Stallions, the Freedom Riders. Soon, independent bikers from across the state joined the growing crowd. By 9:30 a.m., hospital security had to close off 2 additional parking lots to accommodate the gathering. 437 motorcycles lined up outside the hospital in neat rows, their chrome parts catching the morning sunlight like thousands of mirrors. The riders themselves were a sight to behold. Leather vests covered in patches, bandanas, beards, tattoos. But something else stood out even more. Pinned to every rider's vest or jacket was a small purple ribbon, the symbol for childhood cancer awareness. Inside the hospital, excitement buzzed through the hallways. Children who were well enough had been wheeled or walked to the windows and balconies. Parents held up smaller kids for a better view. Nurses and doctors abandoned their routines to witness the spectacle below. In room 412, Zara could barely contain herself. For 3 weeks, she had watched Tank and his brothers transform her simple friendship with one biker into a massive charity event. She had helped design the route map and picked the checkpoint locations. She had folded flyers until her small hands cramped, and she had insisted on making a special flag for the start of the ride. Now, dressed in her hospital gown with her honorary angel vest over it, Zara clutched the checkered flag she had colored herself. "Are you ready, sweetheart?" Denise asked, adjusting the purple bandana covering her daughter's bald head. Zara nodded, eyes shining with excitement. "Do you think they can all see me from down there?" "Oh, they'll see you," Tank promised. He had come up early to escort Zara to her position of honor at the largest 4th-floor window, which the hospital staff had specially opened for the occasion. Dr. Chen made one final check of Zara's vital signs. "Remember, 10 minutes by the open window, then back to bed for rest," she instructed, though her usual stern tone had softened. At exactly 10 a.m., Tank lifted Zara carefully so she could lean out just enough to be visible to the crowd below. A huge cheer erupted from hundreds of throats as the riders caught sight of the small girl in the leather vest. "Ladies and gentlemen, start your engines!" boomed Preacher's voice through a megaphone. The roar that followed was like nothing Zara had ever heard, a thunderous, physical wall of sound as 437 motorcycles fired up at once. The hospital windows actually vibrated. Several nurses covered their ears, but Zara just laughed with pure joy. When Tank nodded, Zara waved her checkered flag back and forth with all her might. Below, Preacher raised his arm and dropped it in response. The sea of motorcycles began to move. Like a massive metal snake, they pulled away from the hospital in perfect formation. Each rider looked up as they passed beneath Zara's window, many raising fists in salute, others honking horns or revving engines in tribute. Zara waved until her arm hurt, then kept waving anyway. She waved until the last motorcycle disappeared around the corner. Only then did she allow Tank to carry her back to bed, exhausted but glowing. Meanwhile, the massive procession wound its way through city streets. Police escorts, many of whom had volunteered their time when they heard about the event, blocked intersections to let the parade pass. People came out of shops and houses to watch, many recording the seemingly endless line of motorcycles on their phones. Once outside the city, the riders hit the open countryside. The 80-mile route took them through rolling farmland, past red barns and golden fields ready for harvest. At each of the 5 checkpoints, a local diner, a Harley dealership, a community center, a roadside bar, and a family restaurant. Riders drew playing cards for their poker hands and dropped donations into collection boxes. News crews caught up with the ride at several points, broadcasting the story of Zara and her biker friends to television audiences across the region. By mid-afternoon, when riders began returning to the hospital, their story had spread across social media. At 5:01 p.m., in the hospital cafeteria, temporarily transformed into an event space, preachers stood before a crowd of tired but happy riders and hospital staff. "Today," he announced, his voice thick with emotion, "the riding community came together for one special little girl and all the fighters like her in this hospital. And together, we raised—" He paused, double-checking the figure Cookie had just handed him on a slip of paper. $23,000. The room erupted in cheers and applause. Doctors who had initially been skeptical wiped away tears. Nurses hugged bikers without hesitation. Hospital administrators who had worried about allowing such an event now shook hands with leather-clad riders, already discussing making it an annual tradition. Upstairs, too tired to join the celebration, Zara dozed in her bed. But she wore a smile as she slept, her honorary angel vest still on, the sound of distant motorcycle engines still echoing in her dreams. Tank sat quietly beside her bed, keeping watch. Denise had gone downstairs briefly to thank everyone, leaving him with a sleeping Zara and his thoughts. Dr. Chen stepped into the room, checking Zara's vitals with practiced efficiency. "You know," she said quietly to Tank, "I've been an oncologist for 15 years. I've seen all kinds of support groups and fundraisers, but I've never seen anything like today." She looked around the pediatric ward, where other children were still buzzing with excitement, trading stories about their favorite motorcycles and showing off souvenirs given to them by riders. "This wasn't just about the money, was it?" she asked. Tank shook his head. "It was about giving them something bigger than being sick, something to be part of, something to look forward to." Dr. Chen nodded. "Medicine treats the disease, but days like today, they heal the spirit." For one remarkable day, St. Mary's Children's Hospital hadn't been a place of sickness and worry. It had been transformed by the unlikely friendship between a little girl and a lonely biker into something else entirely, a place of hope. The days following the charity ride brought changes no medicine could explain. For Tank Rodriguez, something fundamental had shifted. The heavy darkness that had followed him for months began to lift. He started sleeping through the night again. He shaved his beard, trimmed his hair. At work, his foreman noticed Tank joking with coworkers for the first time since the divorce. "What's gotten into you?" his friend Mike asked one day over lunch. Tank thought about it, sandwich halfway to his mouth. "Found something that matters more than feeling sorry for myself," he answered simply. Every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, Tank visited room 412 after his shift. Sometimes he'd bring small gifts, a new toy motorcycle, magazines about bikes, once even a DVD documentary about women motorcycle racers that made Zara's eyes light up with possibilities. But mostly, he just showed up. He sat beside her bed during treatments, distracting her with stories about his construction projects or motorcycle adventures. On better days, they'd play card games or draw pictures of dream bikes they'd design together someday. Tank never promised Zara she'd get better. As someone who had seen enough heartbreak, he knew better than to make guarantees. But he talked about the future as if her recovery was the most natural thing in the world. "When you're riding your own bike someday," he'd say, or, "You'll understand when you're older and building your first custom chopper." Those casual mentions of a future beyond the hospital walls became tiny anchors for Zara to hold on to during the hardest days of treatment. December brought difficult news. Zara's cancer was proving stubborn. Dr. Chen recommended a more aggressive treatment protocol, more chemicals, stronger doses, harder days ahead. When Denise called Tank with the news, he arrived at the hospital within the hour, still wearing his dusty work clothes. "We've got this," he told Zara, his massive hand engulfing her tiny one. "One day at a time, just like fixing an engine. You find the problem, you deal with it, and you move forward." That night, Tank called another meeting with his Hells Angels brothers. By morning, they had organized a rotating schedule. 2 riders would be available at the hospital every day to run errands for Denise, to sit with Zara when her mother needed rest, to provide whatever support was needed. Wheels. Thompson set up a small workshop in the hospital's activity room, teaching kids how to build model motorcycles. Cookie Williams convinced the hospital cafeteria to let him use their kitchen once a week to bake special treats for the children's ward. Doc Patterson, with his medical background, helped translate complicated treatment information into language families could understand. January turned to February. February became March. Through the cold winter, the Hells Angels became a fixture at St. Mary's. Nurses who had once been wary now greeted them by name. Security guards saved them the best parking spots. Even the hospital administrator, a straight-laced woman in her 60s, had taken to wearing a small pin with the Hells Angels logo on her lapel. For Zara, the path wasn't easy. The stronger chemo left her weaker than before. There were days she was too sick to talk, days when even Tank's presence couldn't break through the fog of nausea and pain. But slowly, cell by cell, the treatment began to work. In early March, Dr. Chen entered room 412 with a smile she couldn't contain. "The latest tests show significant improvement," she told Denise and Zara. "If this continues, we might be talking about remission sooner than expected." 2 weeks later, the word everyone had been waiting for finally came: remission. The cancer was retreating. Not gone, not yet, but Zara was winning the fight. The day Zara was strong enough to leave the hospital for a short outing, she had only one request. "I want to see Tank's garage," she told her mother. "I want to see where the motorcycles live." Tank had been preparing for this day for weeks. He had cleaned his usually cluttered garage until it sparkled. His tools hung in perfect order on the wall. In the center stood his Harley, polished to a mirror shine. When Tank's doorbell rang that Saturday morning, he found himself suddenly nervous. This would be the first time seeing Zara outside the hospital, the first time seeing her as just a kid, not a patient. She stood on his porch wearing jeans and a purple sweater, her honorary angel vest proudly displayed on top. Her hair was just beginning to grow back, a soft fuzz covering her head like the first grass of spring. Beside her, Denise smiled at Tank's obvious emotion. "Well, are you going to show me those motorcycles or what?" Zara demanded, hands on her hips. For the next 2 hours, Tank taught Zara the basics of motorcycle maintenance. He let her sit on his Harley, her feet nowhere near reaching the ground. With infinite patience, he helped her use a wrench to remove a spark plug, her small hands guided by his large ones. Watching her daughter laughing in this unlikely place, Denise took Tank aside. "I don't know how to thank you," she said quietly. "The doctors say her attitude played a huge part in her recovery. You gave her that." Tank shook his head. "She had it already. She gave it to me." By summer, Zara was strong enough to attend the second annual Ride for Zara and Friends, this time standing outside the hospital rather than watching from a window. With over 600 motorcycles and riders from 5 states, they raised $41,000 for pediatric cancer programs. As the years passed, the event grew even larger. The hospital created a permanent motorcycle therapy program where riders brought their bikes for children to see and touch. Studies showed that patients involved in the program had shorter hospital stays and reported less pain during treatment. Tank never missed a week visiting kids at St. Mary's, even after Zara's treatments ended. His construction company began specializing in healthcare facilities. He never did reconcile with his ex-wife, but he rebuilt his relationship with his daughter Maria through regular video calls and summer visits. As for Zara, the little girl who once sent a note to a sad man with a broken motorcycle, she grew stronger every day, carrying with her the most important lesson of all. Sometimes the people who look the most frightening on the outside have the gentlest hearts within. If you believe in the healing power of kindness, how one small act can change lives in ways we never expect, tap that like button. Because in a world that sometimes seems broken, compassion might just be the spark plug we all need. 10 years later, on a perfect autumn day, much like the one when Zara first sent her note down to Tank, hundreds of motorcycles once again gather outside St. Mary's Children's Hospital. Their engines rumble like distant thunder as they line up in perfect formation. But this time, something is different. Leading the pack isn't Tank on his old Electra Glide. Instead, a slender 18-year-old girl sits astride a small blue motorcycle, her honorary angel vest now fitted to her teenage frame. A purple helmet covers her head, where thick black curls have long since replaced the baldness of her childhood. Zara Williams, cancer survivor, high school senior, and the inspiration behind what is now the largest charity motorcycle event in the state. As she revs her engine, a sound she once only dreamed about while watching from a hospital window, Zara catches Tank's eye from his bike beside hers. He gives her a nod that contains a decade of friendship, pride, and shared battles. "Ready to lead us out, kid?" he asks over the rumble. Zara grins. Born ready. With that, the 10th annual Angel Ride begins. What started with 13 Hells Angels has grown to over 1,000 riders from across the country. What began as a simple gesture for one sick child has become a movement that has transformed countless lives. The hospital's main lobby now features a wall dedicated to the event's history. At its center hangs a large framed photograph, a small black girl in an oversized leather vest, surrounded by bearded bikers, all of them smiling. The caption reads simply, "Zara's Angels, 2005. Beside it, a plaque tracks the ride's accomplishments. Over $500,000 raised for pediatric cancer programs, 3 new treatment rooms funded. A permanent motorcycle therapy program established, college scholarships created for young cancer survivors. Dr. Patricia Chen, now the hospital's chief of pediatric oncology, often brings new doctors to this wall. Medicine isn't just about protocols and treatments, she tells them. Sometimes healing comes from the most unexpected places. This is what happens when we look beyond appearances and connect as human beings. The Hells Angels chapter that once seemed so intimidating has become an essential part of the hospital community. Every Christmas, they deliver toys. Every summer, they organize barbecues for patient families. Throughout the year, they show up, not as scary bikers, but as friends who understand that the toughest battles aren't always fought with fists. Tank Rodriguez, now in his mid-50s, with more gray than black in his beard, eventually became the chapter president when Preacher retired. Under his leadership, the Angels expanded their community work to other hospitals across the state. His construction company now specializes in building accessible homes for families with medical needs. The friendship between a lonely biker and a sick little girl created ripples that touched thousands of lives. It taught lessons that no classroom could, that heroes don't always look like we expect. That family isn't just about blood, but about who shows up when you need them most. That healing happens in many forms, sometimes through medicine, sometimes through unlikely friendship. That one small act of kindness, like a note tied to a toy motorcycle, can change the course of many lives, and perhaps most importantly, that we should never judge someone's character by their appearance. As the motorcycle procession makes its way through town, people line the streets to watch. Many hold signs thanking the riders. Some wear purple ribbons in solidarity. Others simply wave, drawn to be part of something larger than themselves. At a red light, a small boy points excitedly at Zara's bike. "Mom, look, a girl biker!" Zara smiles and revs her engine, making the boy laugh with delight. She remembers being that child, looking out at the world from behind a barrier, dreaming of freedom and speed and open roads. Now she's living that dream and helping others find theirs. When people ask Zara about her future plans after high school, her answer never varies: pediatric oncology nursing and motorcycle maintenance on weekends. In 2005, when social media was just emerging and communities still formed through direct personal connections, Zara Williams and Tank Rodriguez proved that genuine human kindness could still move mountains, or in their case, hundreds of motorcycles. Their friendship began with a broken-down Harley and a paper note, but it created ripples of compassion that continue to this day. That's the power of looking beyond appearances. That's the magic that happens when we reach out to others in their darkest moments. Subscribe to hear more amazing true stories that will restore your faith in humanity. Because the world is full of Tanks and Zaras, people whose unlikely connections remind us of what matters most.